objectification comes when we don't trust. And when we objectify, that puts us in control. We control when we don't trust. The less we trust, the more we control.
What if your horse could teach you more about yourself than any self-help book ever could? In this episode, we sit down with Duey Freeman, a world-renowned therapist, educator, and equine expert whose work in relational horsemanship and Gestalt therapy is transforming how we connect with our horses and ourselves. With decades of experience and a passion for authentic relationships, Dewey dives into how horses mirror our emotions, reveal our truths, and help us grow in ways we never imagined. Whether you're looking to deepen your bond with your horse or unlock your own personal growth, this episode is packed with insights, heart, and real-life takeaways. If you're ready to see your horse and yourself in a whole new light, this is an episode you can't miss.
Dear Horse World, it's Duey Freeman.
All right. Dewey, welcome to the Dear Horse World podcast.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's really been amazing to get to know you and the work that you do in this world. And you're going to correct me if I hope I'll do this justice. So you are one of the leading thought leaders, one of the leading minds in the world on attachment theory. Is that correct?
I'm not sure if I've ever been called that, but I'll take it.
Okay. I've listened to a lot of your podcasts, and I've had the privilege of get to work with you over the last couple of days, and it's been like life-changing.
Thank you.
I really want to explain to our listeners what it is that you do, and how your work exists in the world.
I actually don't even know quite where to start with this.
Yeah.
So the overview is I'm a therapist. I've been working with people in one way or another since 1970. And have many, many iterations of what I do. Mm-hmm. Right now, I do a lot of teaching. I work with couples and individual clients. I'm the founder and actually, to be totally fair, there's a woman named Joni Rigger who helped me found the Gestalt Equine Institute of the Rockies. Mm-hmm. And Joni has not been a part of the Institute for maybe 5 or 6 years now, but I do want to give her credit for being my co-founder.
Okay.
The biggest piece that I'm working with and almost from every angle that I come in, whether it's in the horse world or whether it's working with couples or whether it's teaching people how to do the work I do with people and horses, is I do look a lot at attachment development. That primarily comes from my own lack of attachment as an infant. And just to share that, my mother had tuberculosis in 1949. Mm. And when I was born, and tuberculosis, so people know, mm-hmm. tuberculosis at that time was almost a death sentence to whomever had it, and people were very worried about her life and also mine. Mm-hmm. I was 4 or 5 months pregnant. She was 4 or 5 months pregnant with me.
Oh, wow.
When that was discovered. So when I was born, she was whisked away and went into the sanitarium, and I was whisked away and began living with relatives in my family, mostly my grandparents and my father and my grandparents. Thankfully, she recovered, but she and I were not really totally reunited until I was about 18 months old.
Oh, wow.
And it was sort of a big enough deal that in the newspaper at the time, they interviewed her. And she essentially said I was like a neighborhood kid moving in. So we had no connection. And to my mother's credit, and this is always very touching to me, is that she tried as hard as she could and spent enormous amounts of time with me, especially in my adult life, helping me work through what happened. But it was because of that process that I started putting together a process of what attachment was about, how do we work with attachment, and how do we work with the developmental processes after that. From a therapeutic perspective, I've been a therapist for, I don't know exactly how long. I think I went into private practice in the early 80s and was actually one of the first people in Colorado to be licensed.
Oh, wow.
As a master's level therapist up until the late 80s. You had to have a PhD and be a psychologist to be licensed. So my license number is 339 and it started at 100. So
wow.
Now if someone gets licensed, it's like six figures. It's like, or 5 figures or whatever.
Wow.
So
you're OG.
Yeah, I've been around a long time. I'm not sure what OG means, but
original.
Yeah, I am one of the earliest people in that. And in the process of my own healing, I have had the chance to work with unbelievably wonderful people. And it's been from that and my own healing and also the teaching I've done. I've taught 34 years at the university level. And have put together a whole theory around, I call it contact theory and attachment theory and developmental theory that I work with and integrate that with Gestalt theory and Gestalt therapy. And I am the person in the world who has put together a developmental theory that actually integrates with Gestalt.
And so what is Gestalt?
Gestalt is an experiential therapy. It was actually the first body-based and somatically based therapy. And it's experiential and experimental versus protocol-based.
Okay.
The definition that I use, and this comes out of my institutes. There's some other definitions out there, but I've actually started or been part of starting 2 institutes. One is a Gestalt Institute that doesn't include working with horses, and one that does include working with horses. So the definition that we use is the exploration of our experience in and of relationship while in relationship.
Cool.
So you might guess it's about relationship.
Really cool.
And when I say in and of, it's like in relationship, like you and I have been.
Yeah.
And if someone's watching that, they're having an experience of our relationship. So it's a fluid kind of a process.
Yeah.
And the core of that of all of the work I do has to do with how we make contact or how we don't make contact. What do we do to promote contact or inhibit contact? And I can speak about that some too, like what contact means.
Yeah, could you maybe share because you have a very powerful definition of what contact is.
Yeah, contact is an attuned moment in time where our energetic, emotional, physical, and or spiritual boundaries touch another. And the coolest part about that I think anyway, is it doesn't have just to do with what happens between 2 people. It has to do with what happens between us and our horses, with us and maybe our dogs or cats, but also with us in nature. Of when we really can allow ourselves to drop into relationship, we can be in relationship with earth, with sky, with sun, with trees, with flowers, plants, and all the beings that live under the sky and on the earth. So, and that's actually one of the pieces that has been so powerful in my learning, and as well as the work that I do with my partner Kimberly, of helping people learn how to be in contact and uh, and let me put in sort of another piece here, is that contact is actually the foundational part and the building blocks of attachment.
Yeah, can you walk us through, because that the contact to relationship to intimacy piece,
Yes,
I think is really important.
So sort of that process. So remember, the contact actually oftentimes happens in very short moments. Like I may be looking at you and then, I might stop and think, or I might be working with a horse. And so contact happens like moving around.
Yeah.
And sometimes contact is a little bit longer, but contact is the way that I look at it, the building block of virtually every relationship. So the way that I work with this is that when contact is there and it's consistent and predictable in a relationship, over time, that creates connection. When connection is consistent and predictable over time, that creates relationship. When relationship is consistent and predictable over time, that creates intimacy. And when I speak of intimacy, I want to be really clear that it's not sexual intimacy. It's intimacy as between two beings. So that can happen between us and our horses, between us and nature, us and dear friends. And sometimes it includes, depending on
like physical intimacy, spiritual intimacy, emotional intimacy.
Exactly.
Mental intimacy, all those things.
Exactly.
So bringing and connecting Gestalt, which is it's foundational work in how we are in relationship, and developmental work. What's the connection between how we develop as human beings and how we are in relationship?
Great question. So can I give a little bit bigger overview?
Yeah, please.
The underlying process of attachment creates a blueprint of how we walk into relationships, how we move into relationships. And the attachment that I'm talking about right now is what I call our original attachment. And out there in the world, there's been some fantastic work done around secure attachment and insecure attachment. That's sort of the paradigm that most people look at.
Yep.
And I think that's really valuable. So the folks that put that together, which are Bowlby and Ainsworth and a number of other people, that I believe is really powerful. And what they speak about is secure attachment and then different levels of what they call an insecure attachment, which is the three main levels are insecure avoidant, insecure anxious, and insecure disorganized.
Yeah.
I look at that a little bit differently.
Okay.
What I look at is what I would call healthy attachment or grounded attachment. And when that doesn't happen, then there's a fragmentation in our attachment process, which if you can sort of picture like one of those 1,000-piece puzzles, and I just saw your eyes go, I just saw that you pictured that, which that's what I'm asking you and other people to do, is a fragmented attachment is sort of like that puzzle not being finished. And sometimes the edges aren't there, and sometimes there's only a few pieces missing, and sometimes there's a lot of pieces missing. So that's how I look at that. So when we have healthy attachment, which some people might call secure attachment, and I can talk about the difference between that.
Okay.
Those in a minute, but the healthy attachment actually provides the blueprint of what we do in relationships, what we expect from relationships, what we bring to relationships, and then how we carry out those relationships. So we use that attachment as the foundation for relationship, which is the foundation of our relational lives, is that original initial attachment. If we have fragmented attachment, that also provides a blueprint of how we walk into relationships and what we expect from relationships and what we bring to relationships and what we ask for in relationships. So the perspective I have is, instead of labels of insecure, anxious, or insecure, avoidant, it's more like attachment is on a continuum of, and depending on different situations, if we've had some fragmented attachment, we sort of slide up and down on that continuum between healthy and fragmented, depending on the situation. And this then is where the contact piece comes in, is instead of labeling somebody as somebody, some people will even walk into my office and go, well, I've been told I have avoidant attachment. And if you really think about that, that's sort of an oxymoron, because if we're avoiding attachment, we don't have attachment. Yeah. So instead of a label, what I'm really looking at is a process. But where I see the avoidant, anxious, or disorganized piece come in is how we make contact. So if I may avoid contact, or I may be anxious about contact, or I may be fragmented or disorganized about contact, versus labeling ourselves as and putting ourselves in a box. What we're really able to work with is what's happening in the present moment. Am I avoiding contact right now? Am I anxious about contact, but I really want to make contact, but I'm anxious and internally judging myself? Or am I just so disorganized that I'm not able to do that? So the process of that has to do with a moment-to-moment presence process instead of this big label.
Right.
And again, interestingly enough, particularly in working with horses, that's what horses are looking for. Like, what's happening in the presence? Right. What's happening? Okay, that 3 seconds is gone. What's happening in this 3 seconds? Well, that 3 seconds is, or 2 seconds or 7 seconds is gone. What's happening right now? So we can work on, and sometimes it takes a period of time for us to truly make contact. But horses are looking for that. Horses are desiring that and actually waiting for us to do that.
Because they are relational beings. That's how they've survived.
They're incredibly relational, and they know how to make contact. And from an energetic place and from an experiential place, they actually know how to do that. That's actually how they've survived for hundreds of thousands of years.
So before we dive, because I'm so excited to dive into how you see and work with horses, and we can talk a little bit about what we've worked on even this week, because I think it's profound. But to go back, you said that you look at the original attachment of an individual.
Right.
What does that mean?
Great question. The original attachment, actually, from my perspective, begins at conception.
Oh, wow.
And there's actually a fair amount of science out there. Like Bruce Lipton is a person who's done a lot of that early work, to where even how we're conceived and the energy that under which we're conceived affects literally what sperm fertilizes
which egg. Wow.
And it progresses, that attachment progresses all the way through our entire time in utero, to where we're literally able to experience connection with our mothers, and interestingly enough, and I really want to put this piece in, with our fathers.
Okay, cool.
If our fathers are present and speaking and touching us through our partners or whatever relationship we have, we as men can make attachment with babies energetically and spiritually and emotionally even while babies are in utero. Thank you for helping me with words. And so we can get that from both parents.
Wow.
And that process begins, and there's 3 core pieces of that.
Okay.
In uteros, we're always getting food and nurturing.
Mm-hmm.
We're always getting touch and contact.
Mm-hmm.
And we're always getting movement of energy through our bodies and our mother's bodies.
Mm.
After birth, and I want to come back to the birthing piece in a moment. After birth, those are the 3 things that we're asking for: is food / nurturing,
yep.
touch / contact, movement / emotional movement, which is that energy through our bodies.
Mm.
And when we have that, and just briefly, I'll walk through this piece, is when we, as infants, ask for food, touch, and movement, we do what I call bidding. A lot of people would call it that.
Yeah.
And we are bidding. We do that by being cute, by wiggling,
mm-hmm.
by crying,
mm-hmm.
by making little noises, and sometimes we, as infants, rage. Sometimes we throw little fits, and sometimes we get really scared. But those are the things that we're asking. When we're doing that as infants, we're literally bidding for our parents to pick us up and provide food, touch, and movement in contact, in relationship. And that piece is that's sort of the key to this,
mm-hmm.
because we can pick babies up and give them food and touch and movement and no contact. And it's actually one of the things this is one of the amazing things that Bowlby found. And this was after World War II, when Bowlby was working in orphanages in England, is that babies were getting food. They were getting their diapers changed, and they were dying because there was no attachment. And I mean, that's the credit I think that we really need to give Bowlby, is him figuring that out.
Wow.
And so we bid for those things. But when we are asking for those things, when we're provided food,
mm-hmm.
when we're provided touch, when we're provided movement, that has to happen in contact and presence from our caregivers. When that happens, and that happens consistently, and that happens predictably, we feel like the world's an okay place to be. And that creates trust. And then it's sort of a cycle that we do. And actually, I have a diagram of that.
You were going to mention something about the birthing process.
Yes. So let me back up a little bit.
Yeah.
When we go through that attachment cycle,
mm-hmm.
babies are going through a hard time and coming out okay when it goes well. And what creates trust is being able to go through a difficult time in contact, in relationship, and come out okay. One of the first times we do that is through the birthing process.
Whoa.
So just take that in for a minute. Yeah.
Well, because I'm thinking of my own birthing process.
Exactly.
So for everyone who's listening, I was a high forceps delivery, which is actually, I think, illegal now. You can't actually deliver babies with forceps, at least in North America. And they talk about it being very traumatizing for the baby.
It is,
and for the mother.
And for the mom.
So
during that process, all the contact between mom and baby is severed. Which, if you can imagine that process as a mother or even a father going through that with his partner,
yes,
is that creates a tremendous amount of fear. And it feels internally like life and death.
Well, and my father talks about how scared he was throughout that process. Because
as a father that has gone through that, and that process of that, it's like I felt incredibly powerless. It's like, which is the exact opposite of the stereotype of what men are supposed to be doing, being powerful and strong. And it's like, completely powerless.
So how would that, because what I want to do is then, I'm really excited to connect this piece to how we relate with our horses and therefore how we relate with other beings. So how would, and for everyone who's listening, Dewey and I have been working together on some really exciting work to understand and to explore how this work can help more people in the horse world. How would that birth experience inform the way that I relate in my life?
Let me go back slightly, just a little bit, because that'll set the foundation.
Perfect.
And every theory that's out there around attachment has to do, if you boil them all down, it has to do with being able to go through a hard time and come out okay.
Right.
And for that, in relationship, for that to be predictable and consistent.
Right.
And when we go through that initial hard time of birth and everybody struggles, that is a setup to not somatically to believe that when we go through a hard time, and we don't hold it in our brain, but we hold it in our body, that if we go through a hard time, we might not come out okay, and we might even die, because it feels like life and death to the baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes feels like life and death to our parents.
Yeah.
When we have that initial breach in attachment, what that does is set us up to not believe that we can go through a hard time and come out okay. That we don't have that underlying foundation of being able to do that. What then oftentimes happens is people don't even think about that. People end up going through all kinds of stuff and going through difficult times and not coming out okay.
Yeah.
So instead of attaching to the person or people that were supposed to go through a hard time and come out okay, we attach to things like food. We attach to movement. We don't trust people.
Right.
And many times what we'll see, and this is actually part of what you said, it's like, I am great with horses, and I don't know if I ever even want to attach to a person.
Yeah.
And that, when I'm saying that, that's not pathological. That's what we have learned from the inside out. And I can't tell you how many people in clinics and talking with people and working therapeutically with people and horses, that people go, I'm great with horses. I am great with dogs. I'm great with cats.
Yeah.
I'm great with trees.
Yeah.
I'm great with nature.
Yeah.
And too bad there are other people on the face of the earth.
Yes. Yeah.
And so that's that fragmentation that I'm talking about. So part of what happens, which is interesting, are you comfortable with us talking about some of your process?
Yes, definitely.
Is some of the process that we worked on with you is wanting attachment so much with our horses that we become invasive.
Yes.
And it's like too much, too soon, too fast for our horses.
Yeah.
It isn't for us, because it's like we want that really badly.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about it is that that desire for that is not cognitive. That desire for that comes from our core gut of, I want and need to be held by a horse in this way. And since I don't necessarily trust people, I'm going to find another being that I can trust, that can hold me, and that is actually willing to do that with and for me. part of what that does, though, interestingly enough, if we go in that way, we are tending to objectify our horses instead of getting that they're having a whole process too.
Yeah.
And that's actually what you and I have been working on, along with Josh.
Yeah.
Of going in slow enough and going in grounded enough and going in solid enough to where our horses actually can attach to us instead of just asking for them to allow us to attach to them. And that's that piece of going all the way back to the definition of Gestalt, is the exploration of our experience in and of relationship, and it's from both parties of the relational process.
Yeah.
And the underlying theory for that comes from a man named Martin Buber, with what he talks about of being the I-thou relationship versus the I-it relationship. And then what we've done in our work is add what we call the I-thou-we relationship, where it's not only do I get that the other being that I'm in relationship with, that they're having a full experience and have had a whole life before they knew us. And we're, instead of objectifying the other, that we're getting that their experience is just as valid, just as deep, maybe just as tough as what we've gone through.
Just to clarify, when you say objectify, so I would, in relationship, and I'm doing this work with you, it's been really powerful to sort of recognize my patterning in relationship. And what's beautiful is the work that you do and your experience and knowledge of horses allows you to observe how a human is in relationship with their horse, and that is very informing of how they are in relationship with other beings,
with every other being in the entire world.
Right. So why would I essentially like objectify people or animals? Where does that like need come from for me, or for anyone who has like a similar experience or has a similar tendency than to me?
Right. So, and let me talk about, there's different levels of objectification. And let me back up just a little bit.
I love when you back up.
Okay. And my horse and I have been working on backing up really well. Is that the objectification comes when we don't trust. And when we objectify, that puts us in control. And we control when we don't trust. The less we trust, the more we control.
Right.
The more we trust, the less we control.
Right.
So I do have a breakdown between control and power. A lot of people talk about power. And then I'm going to weave this back into what your question was.
Cool.
Is power, to me, is the ability to influence and be influenced. So that's where we get away from the objectification.
Yeah.
To influence and be influenced in contact, in relationship.
Cool.
So what we want to do, what you and I have been working on along with Josh, is for you to be influenced by your horse instead of you just wanting to influence your horse.
Yes.
And just to be clear, I mean, you have wanted to come in and be influenced. Just a little bit.
Yeah.
And what we've been working on is raising that threshold of you allowing yourself to be influenced actually to the point, and part of what we've been talking about is the idea of giving your horse something to attach to and something to grab hold of.
Yes. Yes.
Which, what was so beautiful we got to see yesterday was you did that with Lady, and Lady just went,
yeah,
and was in seventh heaven with you.
Yeah.
So it's literally that place where the attachment process is both ways. It's a reciprocal process. It's not it's not like, oh, here's my horse, I'm going to attach to my horse. And even that happens in infancy. It's the attachment process goes both ways. It's not we're not just attaching to our mothers and fathers or caregivers. We're doing that, and they're attaching to us too.
Yeah.
And so that's where we break down the objectification and move into a truly I-thou relational process between us and another.
Well, and what's really powerful, and I'll share with everyone listening, is when Dewey was there observing me through, we were loading the horses to go to Happy Dog, and then we were going to do sessions at Happy Dog. And one of the first things you said to me when Gigi, my gelding, was struggling to get on the trailer was, are you giving him something to attach to? Are you giving him something to connect to?
Yeah, and I think I used the word something to grab hold of.
Yeah, grab hold of. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. And since, in the last 72 hours, and in the last 3-4 days that we've been working together, I have then gone back to think about moments that I've had, really challenging moments I've had with my horses in competition or in clinics, where I do recognize that I would leave my body, just check out energetically. I'd just be like, this is really tough. I don't know. I would it's like an energetic abandonment for my horses. And I can recognize that in so many moments throughout my life where I have just exited stage left. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know that I was doing it. I felt overwhelmed in the moment and I didn't feel grounded. And so I would just kind of feel overwhelmed and leave. And having explored this world of horsemanship and having to really deepen my understanding of what it is to be in relationship with horses, I then have received feedback, especially from my mare, of
she's pretty darn honest.
She is. And thank God she is, because she's making me aware of something that I haven't been aware of in the past, which is, do you stay in connection when things get hard? And I have not. And what I'm learning from you is that it's not, it's like we don't need to look at ourselves as it's not our fault. We're not pathological. It's because it's a blueprint. It's connected to how we came into this world and how we began our relational experience with other beings, which is really empowering and also really sort of profound to me, because it explains so much of my behavior for the last 37 years. In within a matter of hours, you were able to explain to me and maybe demystify a little bit of how I move through the world and why I move through the world.
Well, and what you're saying is 100% true. And one of the big pieces that you spoke about was that it's not pathological.
Yeah.
Your mother did nothing wrong. Your father did nothing wrong. Most of the attachment issues that we have come from parents who tried as hard as they could.
Yeah. Yeah.
And most attachment issues come from parents who actually have some attachment wounding themselves.
Right.
So one of the pieces that happens for you when you exit stage left, which is a really good way to put it. I just had this picture of when you were working with G to go into the trailer, you literally would exit stage left. You would move to your left more than you would to your right.
Oh, interesting.
And I want to talk about that in a minute, because it was so profound. And it was actually profound what Josh was saying.
Yes.
And Josh and I were working together, which was a profound experience, I believe, for both of us. I can surely say for me.
Yes. I think for all of us.
Yes.
All of us present.
All of us present. And but when you exit, it's not a thing it's not resistance. It's not pathological. It's not that there's something wrong with you. It's that you're actually trying to protect yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can view you and that process that way,
Mm-hmm.
then what can happen is, as a therapist, I can go, well, let me help you protect yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the relational part. That's the, let me do that for you, because when, at least for a little bit, so that you know what that's like. And because nobody protected you during the high forceps delivery.
Right.
And they couldn't. And again, I'm not going back and going, oh, horrible doctors, horrible medical. I'm not doing any of that. I'm just saying that's what happened.
Well, and there are a series of others, you know, in the work that we've done together, there was a series of other experiences I had at a very young age that, again, proved, you know, I think parents have a choice that when these things happen, you can repair, and then you can give lots of evidence that children are okay. I, unfortunately, had a series of other experiences that would prove that things would not always be okay.
Exactly.
But what I want to explain to those who are listening or watching, when I talk about exiting stage left, I think it's important to explain what that means, because I didn't physically remove myself from the situation.
That is true.
And this is what I've kind of, in journaling about what we've been working on with between you and Josh, and then also working, you know, like on the relational piece, just on the relational human psychological aspect of me and how I'm in relationship. When I exit stage left, I go into the future most of the time, or I go into the past. But what happens is, like when we were loading Gigi, I'm thinking, okay, you gotta, you know, because my mare has been typically the one that requires more management around loading and traveling. She had loaded and I didn't want her to wait long for him. So I'm thinking, okay, come on. I was literally getting sort of feeling energetically impatient with him, going, okay, I want you to load now because, you know, Lady's there. I don't want her to start pawing. I want her to have a positive experience. I'm also mindful of the fact that we're trying to get to Happy Dog. So what happens is that I go into story and I go into the future. And that's usually a place that I find that I've developed a lot of anxiety. And then when I look at my historical experiences, I've also done the same thing. I would be in an overwhelming situation, and I would either foretell bad things that were happening, or I would go back to what had happened in the past, and then I would be concerned about that repeating itself. So what happens is that, and this is, you tell me if this is correct, but basically what happens is that I'm no longer present in the moment, which is the only way that horses can feel us energetically, is if we are present in the moment. So a lot of those situations, my horses were like, cool, you are no longer here. You are either in the future or in the past. So they have nothing to grab hold of. Yeah,
and at that point, they have to take care of themselves.
Right. And something that I remember asking I had a podcast, I did an episode with Nikki Flundra, who's an amazing horsewoman. She works on Heartland, and she's this incredible horsewoman that works on movie sets. And I asked her, I said, I need to ask you, like, how do you deal with the stress and the pressure of being there with your horses and navigating those moments where you kind of have, like, let's say, hey, we got 3 takes, like, you need to get this with your horse. And she said those can be really hard, but she says the one thing that allows her to stay grounded is she just constantly thinks about what her horse needs in that moment.
Right.
And I thought, what a beautiful thing to mentor in others, because that was not mentored in me. I never thought of that. I've always been I can feel now I've been in sort of self-preservation mode, because I thought that I needed to protect myself because no one else was going to.
Well, and even in that moment of loading, you were thinking about protecting Lady.
Yes. Yeah.
So again, it's like, we want that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to throw in another little piece here.
Cool.
And we haven't talked about this to this point. We want to be seen, heard, gotten, cherished, and protected.
Oh, wow.
Those are the 5 things. Those are 5 elements of every relationship that we want.
Can you say that again? Yes. I want to close my eyes when you say this.
Okay. And actually let yourself feel these in your body when I'm saying these. You want to be seen, heard, gotten, cherished, and protected. And those 5 pieces, are sort of the core of attachment.
Right.
If I'm in relationship with you, I mean, we become, at least from my perspective, pretty darn good friends.
Yes.
I want to see you. I want to hear you. I want to get you. I want to cherish him. I want to protect you. I want you to do that with me too.
Right.
I want that to happen with my horses. And I know that you want that to happen with your horses.
Yeah.
And part of what was happening with G, and this is, I hope that people can visualize this.
Yes.
Is that he would load to where you were standing, but he wouldn't go beyond that.
Yeah.
And he would walk in and be exactly where you were, looking to attach.
Yeah.
Looking to go, are you here?
Are you here with me?
Yes. Are you seeing, hearing, getting, cherishing, and protecting me?
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as you backed up a little bit and opened to him instead of thinking about Lady who was behind you,
yeah,
he walked right in.
Yeah. Have you ever felt stuck with your horse? Maybe they're spooking one minute and unresponsive the next. And instead of your training sessions bringing you closer, they're only adding to the frustration and you both feel depleted or worn out. What if the issue isn't your horse or your technique? What if it's about a deeper need your horse has that's being overlooked? When I first got my mare Lady, she swung back and forth between complete distrust and disassociation of people to highly anxious and sometimes highly aggressive. From day one, Lady was very communicative, clearly wanting me to understand some things about her and her reality, but I didn't know how to interpret what she was trying to tell me until I met Josh Nickel. I had heard about his relational approach to horsemanship, so when I got a lucky last-minute spot in one of his clinics, I jumped at the opportunity. Within the first 10 minutes, on the first day of the clinic, I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be, and I knew Josh's work was the missing piece I had felt in my own riding for so many years. In Josh Nickel's course, Understanding Your Horse's Needs on NF+, you'll discover 3 fundamental needs that each horse has: mind, space, and pressure. These aren't just labels. They represent the emotional core of your horse's behavior. If your horse feels disconnected, anxious, or even aggressive or unpredictable, it could be that a primary need isn't being met. In his masterclass, Josh teaches you how to recognize which primary need your horse is asking to be met moment to moment. Then, how to meet that need and build a deeper connection based on trust and understanding. I can speak from experience. When your horse feels seen and understood by you because you are addressing their core needs, they transform in front of your eyes. My mare Lady sure has. If you're ready to better understand your horse and get the answers you need, just like I did, and continue to do, head to noelfloydplus.com or download the Noel Floyd app on Apple TV, Roku, iOS, and Android, and start learning today. The beautiful combination of working with you and Josh in combination was Josh was saying, I want you to watch his eye.
Exactly.
And that's going to allow you to see him and see what is going through his mind and to understand and to get him. And he was unloading in his eye. And that's what Josh drew attention to, was your horse is unloading in his mind. So we need to encourage him and make him feel supported to load in his mind before his body.
Exactly. And he was looking to you for that.
Exactly. And then imagine for him that if I'm thinking about Lady and I'm thinking about the time and I'm thinking about, the weather or whatever you're thinking about in those moments, he's like, there's no one there to attach to. There's no one there to connect with.
Right. Which is what he was looking for.
Yes.
And Lady was just, so people can see this, this was a stock trailer.
Yes.
And Lady was behind a gate that had been closed.
Yes.
Lady was doing just fine.
Yeah.
but he wasn't able to see her. Mm-hmm. And he was looking at you.
Yeah.
So that the piece that Josh brought in about watching her eye mm-hmm. and watching what was happening energetically in her eye was beautiful. Mm-hmm. And I was outside the trailer, so I couldn't see that. Mm-hmm. But what I could see and get was that he meaning G was looking to you. So it's going, where are you? Because you're my safe place right now.
Yes.
You're my herd.
You're my relationship.
And you're my relationship right now.
Yeah.
And I trust you. But if you leave, then there's nothing, the attachment gets broken.
Yeah.
What he wanted was to be protected by you.
Yeah.
And when we leave, we're protecting ourselves.
Yes.
But that does not, when that happens, it doesn't allow us to protect the others around us.
Yes. And to reflect and to share, and this is a bit of a deep share for everyone who's listening, but in a lot of my relationships, human included, I have, I think, been in self-preservation mode and been in, like, there are moments where I have left out of self-protection and I haven't stayed in connection through difficult times. And I think when you do that enough, you build a pattern so that when people are in deep relationship with you, they can feel that.
Totally.
So what's powerful and to share a little bit with everyone, what we've been working on is I wanted to explore what would it mean if you brought two, thought leaders, two people, you and Josh are some of the best in your field, if not the best in your field. And you're both fundamentally steeped, fundamentally rooted in the belief of relational work. So completely. Josh, he talks about his work being is about relational horsemanship, how we are in relationship with our horses. And when I had heard of you and I had dove into your work, it was so fundamental. The framework of your work is all about how we are in relationship and then how our early experiences inform how we are in relationship. And I remember thinking, what would happen if we could bring these two amazing men into a room, and could they observe what was happening between a human and their horse? Could they draw light? Could they riff off? Could they observe things that no one can observe? Because everyone, and I know that you and Josh have talked about this, horse trainers are not psychologists. Psychologists are not horse trainers. And yet in the relationship between a horse and a human, you do need both.
Completely. And there was magic that happened between Josh and I.
Yeah.
The reason that happened, though, from my perspective, is that Josh and I very openly, very vulnerably created a relationship between each other. And to the point to where we developed a fairly deep amount of trust with each other. I would say more than fairly deep. A very deep amount of trust between each other, so that we knew that we did not have to protect ourselves from the other.
Right.
While we were working with you, Lady and G. And that's a hugely important piece.
Yeah.
And the pieces of work that you did and that you did with both Lady and G you were able to go through a hard time and come out okay, and do that repeatedly and consistently with support, without judgment.
Right.
So it did not matter to me. It did not matter to Josh. It did not matter to G. It did not matter to Lady. If you, and I'll use this word, got yourself all Twitter baited. And by that, I mean going, oh my gosh, I don't know what's happening here.
Yeah.
That did not matter to anybody. What mattered was, how do we help you protect yourself? How do we help you find your ground again? How do we help your horses find their ground again? And how do we help you come back? Because you're right about the leaving. And one of the pieces, I want to throw this piece in, is that many, many people talk about horses being prey. And particularly in in the wild.
Yeah.
I mean, horses are not predators. They don't hunt. They graze. They they actually have learned over millions of years to protect each other through relationship.
Yeah.
When we have had loss, when we have issues around attachment, when we've had trauma, we oftentimes feel like we're prey. And what's interesting is that horses have actually learned how to live with that and stay in contact.
Right.
Many times when we feel like we're in that process, we go out of contact.
Right.
And so the work is how do we help you and support you and even stand next to you in a way that provides that protection so you don't have to be prey, so that you have choice. And it's the same thing. And many people have spoken to this around if we're not predators, horses don't have to be prey.
Right.
And so if we go in that neutral place where we're making contact, where we're in contact with our own process, we're in contact with you, we're in contact, providing the availability of contact, and we're in contact with whatever horses we're working with, that provides a space for everybody to go, to settle, and to do what they already know how to do, which is what happened for you. You know, and we even talked about this, some stuff happened in your life around 4-ish. But before that, you, I think, did fairly well.
I think I had a super healthy, I had a lot of consistent evidence that I was safe and loved. And
right. Even with the process of your birth, that I think from what you've spoken about, that there was some healing around that.
Yes. Yeah.
And so all we're doing is helping you. What you did really well from birth, and actually I think sounds like from conception to 4-ish, is to help you go back and do what you already knew.
Yeah, totally.
And horses do that same thing. And many times people will say, well, but horses can be traumatized. They can. Yeah.
And Lady is traumatized, so we've been moving through that herself, with her own journey.
But that's part of why it's been so important for you to give her something to grab hold of. Yes. Instead of just depending on her to give you something to grab hold of. Yes. And as soon as so that's it's a mutual process. It's a reciprocal process, which is what happens in every relationship. And what's interesting is before Josh and I even met each other, in fact, the first time we did meet each other, he started talking about relational horsemanship. Well, that's the term I use too. I have used that for decades now. Right. I didn't know that Josh was using that. He didn't know I was using that, but it was like, oh, okay, good. Okay. We're starting from the same place. Yes. And we have had many discussions about what that means to each of us. And that's actually been much of the catalyst of what has happened between Josh and I. Yes. Which has given the trust to be able to work together, to work with you and Lady and you and G. Yeah. And sort of the three of you as a little herd. Yeah. 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 So one of the things that you work on, and one of the ways in which you integrate horses into your work with humans, is there is a lot of evidence around what happens when we're riding horses. And I wanted to kind of explore that because I have, since you've explained this to me, I've experienced this. And I want to explain, I want us to sort of break down when we're riding, when we're on our horse's back, there's a motion that happens with our pelvis. And I was hoping you could kind of break that down because this again connects into the relational, how completely profound horses are for humans understanding
how we move through the world.
Let me begin with a piece that our friend Sol
Yes.
spoke about.
Yes.
And Sol is a dear friend. Sol is also a phenomenal body worker.
Yeah. Traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncturist.
All those wonderful things.
Yes.
And what Sol spoke about is, in a discussion that we were all having, was that when we're sitting on our horses, we're sitting right above our horses' hearts.
Mm-hmm.
And through our perineum, and there are many different levels, our first chakra.
Yeah.
I mean, there's different ways to describe that. Or our pelvic core is a way that I describe that, is that the energy from our horse's heart comes up through our pelvic core.
Yes.
And into our bodies.
Yes.
And so we feel that energetically.
Mm-hmm.
And many people in my work as a therapist, working with people with horses as co-therapists, will sit on a horse and start sobbing. Yeah. Or lay on a horse and sob and go, I don't know what's happening. I don't know. It's like all I did was sit on this horse and now I'm in full-blown tears and I'm not sure how long this is going to take, those kind of feelings. So that's one piece, which I think is really a profound piece that Sol brought in.
Yes.
Another piece that I speak about a lot is that with attachment, part of what happens is we get held. When we're infants, we get held and we get rocked.
Right.
And we need that. In therapeutic work, it's not appropriate for anybody to say, here, sit in my lap and let me rock you. We can't do that. Rightfully so, just so everybody knows that. But a number of things happen. One is actually no matter how big we are, horses can hold us. And it's one of the few places we can be held by another being.
Right.
Without harming anybody, without hurting anybody. And we're being held with our pelvises being opened.
Right.
And I often talk about energetically, our pelvis is our sort of grand central station.
Yeah.
It's where all the energy moves up and down and through and sideways. It's the core of that energetic movement.
Cool.
So when we're on a horse and a horse is moving us, that horse is opening up our pelvis and therefore opening up, and especially if we can relax our seat into movement, which is one of the pieces that every instructor, every person who speaks about, it's like, relax your pelvis, take a breath and relax your pelvis.
Yeah.
And let your pelvis move. Let your horse move your pelvis.
Yeah.
All of those things.
Yeah.
So one is if there's blockage of energy, horses through the movement of our pelvis actually help begin allowing us to move energy in ways that have never been moved maybe forever.
Wow.
With some people.
Just a heads up, the next part of this conversation contains explicit content in the context of therapy with people who have experienced sexual abuse. The insights offered could be helpful for some listeners, but the terminology may be triggering for others. If you would like to skip this section, jump ahead 2 minutes.
It's also a place where we're touched in our pelvises and our genitals in a way that is a healthy touch. And so people who've had sexual abuse or sexual invasion or those sorts of things.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It's actually oftentimes the first time that people have been touched in a way that's safe.
Whoa.
Yeah. So just take that in for a moment.
Yeah. That's quite profound.
So anybody who's had sexual invasion, and this is for both men and women, there's movement and there's energy in that part of our body, the pelvic part of our body, that starts to get moved. It doesn't get moved any other way.
Right.
And then the third piece I'll throw out is a horse's pelvis is exactly like our pelvis. It's just bigger.
Yeah, I remember you said this in a podcast once and it blew my brain. You look at the two and you can't tell them apart.
I have pictures actually of horses' pelvises when I'm teaching all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Of a horse's pelvis and a human pelvis. And the pictures are set up so that they look the same size in the two pictures.
Yeah, you can't tell the difference in the size.
So people can't tell because of the scale.
Yeah.
They're exactly the same. And which when I saw that, and this was like probably 3 to 4 decades ago, I was going, okay, something's got to be connected here.
Whoa.
One of the main ways that we're moved in utero is when our mothers walk and when our mothers run and when our mothers are moving around.
Yeah.
One of the way, and when I say this, I want everybody to know I'm saying this with both respect and admiration, just so that everybody knows. If you watch a woman who is 7 to 8 months pregnant walk, and you watch a horse walk, their pelvises move the same way.
Wow.
Again, obviously a horse is a bigger being than a woman and at that point, but it's a same movement. So part of what is that, and I wish I would have just, been smart enough to go, oh, this is what happens. But I just saw this through observation and working with people around attachment, is when somebody is on a horse and their pelvis is being moved, it's the closest that we can come to helping somebody relive that inner uterine experience. And in the work that I've done, I've had many people actually have some level of memory of what has happened.
Wow.
Or the other piece that happens is a huge amount of healing. It's like people say, I've never been moved this way. I've never felt so relaxed. I've never felt so held. And so with all the energy that's coming up through our horses into our bodies, which Sol was talking about, and that level of movement, just that process can be incredibly healing.
Yes.
But it also can be incredibly triggering.
Right.
In a way that we're not expecting, because what we want to do is ride our horses and enjoy.
Right.
And so many times, and I work with this therapeutically with people, but many times someone will be on a horse and they'll get off and go, I don't know what's happening, but I went away, because sometimes it's overwhelming, or tears will come, or people will be afraid, or what people will do is some people will just tighten up and not let their pelvises be moved. And then they're in a clinic or they're in a riding lesson, and the instructor is saying, let your horse move your pelvis. Let your horse move you. And so what I've seen on many levels is people get opened up emotionally and energetically in ways that they don't expect and they don't know why.
Well, and you are a horseman. We have a lot of mutual friends in the horse world, and you work with lots of cowboys and horsemen and horsewomen who teach a variety of different modalities. So you've attended lots of clinics.
I've been in probably way too many clinics.
So what's that like for you as a psychologist and someone who understands the nuances of the physiological and psychological experience of a human when they're in and around horses, especially when they're being moved by horses, especially when they're riding because their pelvis is being moved? What have you witnessed in those scenarios?
Well, it's actually been interesting, because part of what people oftentimes ask me they're of, when they find out what I do,
Yeah.
one of their first responses is, "Are you analyzing me? Do you walk around analyzing everyone?" The answer is absolutely not. It's like, I'm very professional when I work, and that's what I do. And when I'm not, I'm just like everybody else in the world.
Yeah.
But what I've seen is, and part of it's even been for me.
Mm-hmm.
In 2010, I had a really bad accident and busted my pelvis. So it took me some work to get through that.
Mm-hmm.
So we end up getting triggered. And I've seen that with not just me, but with a whole lot of people.
Mm.
And so all kinds of stuff will be coming up that people don't know what it's about.
Right.
And the clinician doesn't know what it's about oftentimes. That's not why they're there. They're not there to go, okay, let's work on your attachment issues.
Yeah. And yet they're navigating these waters anyway.
And because it's just there.
Right. It's very present.
It's very present. And what I've seen are people really struggle in some clinics
mm-hmm.
and not know why. And also for there to be some significant struggle between participants in the clinic, because person A and person B and person D all might be triggered from some attachment or trauma issues.
Right.
And there's no way to navigate that. Many people don't even know what's happening.
Right.
So all of this stuff is happening sort of behind the scenes that nobody really either knows about or there's even space to attend to it. And I've talked to numbers of clinicians and they go, but not only do I not know what to do, I'm not sure I want to know what to do. That's not what I'm doing in the world.
Right.
And so I do end up in a position at times going, I'm here just to connect with me and my horse. But all this stuff is around you. It's sort of like, around me, it's sort of like when there's a thunderstorm that happens, you can't ignore it.
Yes.
And so I see that, and I actually think that some people in clinics, some of the participants and really struggle with things and leave clinics going, we walk in and want to have a great experience, and we leave from anywhere from being disappointed to pretty upset. And I also think it affects the relationships between the people and the participants in clinics.
Well, and I remember when the first time we had this conversation was after I had a really challenging clinic experience. And it was an unexpected, I didn't know what I was going into. And I've always found clinics to be challenging because they're very vulnerable.
Exactly.
I've always found the idea of being observed hard, like especially when you have a crowd of people around you and then you're being instructed to, and then depending on, I find myself very sensitive to the tone of people. So if you start to feel or hear a frustrated tone in the clinician's voice or things like that, those are things that I would typically in the past like exit my body, right? Because I go, okay, I'm no longer safe. This is not a safe place.
Right.
And I've always found like the more auditors you have in a clinic, the more, you have a story, whether you're being judged or not, you have a story that you're being judged. And when I had a conversation with you after this super challenging clinic experience where the relationship between the participants were really fractured, and they were really between myself and other participants and between myself and the hosts. And it really, it shook me to my core. Like I had these really big releases, and luckily I was surrounded by Soul and a few other close friends, good, safe women that I was able to just confide in and go this is a really hard weekend. I'm feeling extremely vulnerable, and I'm feeling and it's really, I was able to maintain some semblance of learning through the weekend. Thank God, because I had tools and I had support. But you helped me understand how psychologically what might be happening for you. And then when I look back on all the clinic experiences or even the competition experiences I've had, and some days you feel amazing, you feel like on cloud nine. And sometimes the rides are the same. Sometimes the experiences, the horse hasn't actually really changed, but some days you feel really like you've been cracked wide open, and you're just like, all of your insides are like exposed to the world, and you feel vulnerable and you feel tender, and you just literally want to, like, I've had moments where I've been at clinics, I just want to go into a corner and like rock myself because I feel so exposed emotionally. And I always thought of myself as a bit of a crazy person, that was something that I was experiencing. And also then and this is like a piece that I would really love for you to sort of unpack, because you highlighted to me that not only is this emotionally and psychologically like up leveling, or like it's like an upheaval of things that can, and you don't really know whether it's going to happen or not, or how it's going to happen. But also that in that state of vulnerability that you're in, you're also going to be sensitive to the relationships, or the lack of relationships with all these people that you have around you, most of the time, which are strangers. And in my clinic experiences, I have very rarely had any relationship with other participants. And so you kind of feel like you're out in a desert alone with your horse.
Totally.
That's the feeling.
And I've had that same experience. And before I continue, I want to be very clear that I'm not talking about any particular clinician here.
Yeah, no, none of us, neither are talking.
And because my experience with virtually every clinician that I've worked with and tried to learn from, their intent has been very good.
Yes.
So, and a part of what happens, and I think this is valid for people, is that the clinician, the focus is on people and their horses.
Yes.
It's not, and actually way more on horses than it is the people that are there.
Yes.
Which I mean, that's why we go to clinics.
Yes.
Like, how do I work with my horse better?
Yeah. So
there are some people who are unbelievably talented at working with horses. And many people are even good with people. But part of what happens is that when we go into a clinic, and Josh and I were talking about this around what's the contract?
Yeah.
And because every relationship has a contract, doesn't matter what the relationship is.
Right.
Whether, and I'm not talking about some written out contract. That's not what I'm talking about. Most of the contracts we have relationally are unspoken and clearly unwritten.
Right.
And sometimes they're even secret. People pretend like there's no contract.
Right.
But the contract of the clinic is how does the clinician help somebody with their horse?
Right.
That's a contract. So the focus is actually on the horse, where there's very little, there's either less or very little focus on what's going on in the person.
Right.
And in the person, and let's say there's 30 people, there's 30 people in some clinics.
There's a lot of people in some clinics.
And then you mentioned auditors. Because whatever's happening in the clinic, the auditors are feeling it. Yeah. And many times they're there and all their stuff gets triggered. And maybe one of the best examples of that is many people have probably seen the documentary on Buck Berneman.
Yes.
And all the stuff that happens, not with horses. Yes. It's all about everything else happening. And so I think that clinicians are put in a very tough position because there's all of this stuff being triggered and happening, and the participants may not even know why. But you're your comment about all the clinics you've been to, and there's where you're saying there's very little connection between the participants, is I have talked to many, 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 many people who have that experience.
Yeah, I think we're not alone in those experiences.
No, because
we're not alone in feeling alone in the experience.
Exactly. And so it puts clinicians, I think, in a position that isn't in the contract, but because of what happens when our pelvises get moved, when we judge ourselves or feel judged, whether we have been or not, that all kinds of both trauma and attachment issues come up for, I think, almost everybody in the clinics that I've seen.
Right.
And I watch that and I see that, and and a lot of what I've seen is the first day everyone's super friendly, and then it almost fades away because people are struggling.
Yes.
And again, I'm not criticizing other participants because other participants are going through their own process. I think that if we can have some level of awareness and some level of even supporting clinicians to do just a few things that are a little bit different, that it could be really, really helpful.
So what are some of those things? I mean, I would love to help those listening, and I myself included. I mean, I have a clinic this weekend. So it's going to be really cool for me to apply. What are some of the things that not only can participants do when they feel like they're going into a clinic experience that may or may not feel emotionally or psychologically supportive, because they're going there to get to work on their horsemanship? So what are some things that participants can do, and what are some things that clinicians can do?
If the clinician can be aware that issues will be coming up, it's part of the seeing, hearing, getting, cherishing, and protecting. Because every clinician that I've worked with actually does care about the people that are there.
I don't think they would be clinicking if they didn't.
I would agree with that.
Right?
Yes. So that's one piece, is that to have the, at least, and the word Josh and I were using, awareness. And then the other piece, because in many of the clinics that I've been at, people have lunches together.
Yeah.
You know, maybe it's an all-day clinic and people get together for lunch, or...
Yeah, there's still there's points of contact and connection.
And many clinics that I've been to, there's maybe a meeting at least at the beginning where people are saying, what do you want to get out of this clinic?
Yeah.
You know, those kinds of things. And that's what most clinicians that I've been with do, you know, and trying to assess, like one clinic I was in that did a lot with working cows. It was up in northern Colorado. The people leading the clinics were, how much have you done with cows? How much, what is your skill level? What do we need to help teach you? I mean, all good clinicians try to figure that stuff out. One, for teaching, but also for safety.
Yeah.
But that work of being aware, and maybe even in some of the early meetings saying that many times people saying, and Josh and I were working on wording, maybe the clinician just saying, we're aware that sometimes all kinds of emotional stuff comes up for people here. And we're not necessarily here to help you work through that. That's not the contract. What we'd really like you to do is, if you're willing to, is to know that other people, you and maybe other people, will be struggling. And cool. If you could get each other's back, that'd be great.
Oh, wow. If I had heard that in a clinic, that would immediately make me feel more safe and just even more seen and understood, and more, like you say, gotten. Like,
exactly.
I would feel safe to have some of the emotions that are coming up within me and not feel like I had to like stuff them back down inside because I'm somehow like the weird one.
Well, if there are, say, 30 people in a clinic and 30 people feel like they're the weird one, it's like everybody's being at least on some levels having some level of protection.
Yeah.
And I've done a bunch of stuff. I have two very good friends out in Santa Barbara. They're not horse people. They've been other kinds of classes and, around public speaking and presentation and stuff like that. And they begin their classes with people making contact with each other.
Cool.
And making a commitment to it's like, I got your back. I got your back.
Yeah, even if like you've gone to events, even if you were to turn to the person next to you in a clinic situation and just introduce yourself and be like, what's one thing, you're really excited about this weekend? What's one thing you're like scared, or like what's
totally.
Like a vulnerable share creates connection.
And that I think is a first step. The other step is when we're talking about contracts, like if we have the contract of I got your back, and I do this when I do a lot of stuff with men and men's groups and men's growth of I got your back, I got your back, I got your back. And it's not turning a clinician into a therapist. What it's doing is bringing awareness to the whole process, because everybody in the clinic, and this has been my experience, everybody in the clinic has a horse's back.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you need help with your horse? I mean, even clinics where people say, well, I'll be happy to feed your horse, or I'll turn out your horse if it's so. I mean, those kind of things.
Yeah. If clinicians were even acknowledging and being made more aware of the sort of psychological landscape that exists within a clinic, I think they might also be more thoughtful about what they say or how they say it, because I know in your experience, you've seen, the clinicians you've experienced have been, or the clinics you've experienced have, you were saying that you weren't speaking ill of anyone. I have a little bit of a different experience. I have seen some clinics in which people are actually quite verbally abusive to some of the participants. I've actually been, I've been in clinics where people were very verbally abusive and just saying
you mean
things.
The instructors or with each other?
Both. And so, I think that being made aware of the psychological landscape of a clinic might also make the clinician more, and everyone, a little bit more aware, a little bit maybe more mindful of what they might say or how they might say it. I mean, there are people in the horse world that were made famous, that literally built a reputation off of being quite cruel to clinic participants. And it became almost a sense of entertainment. And I think some people listening will know, like there was like almost like an era in which that was okay. That was like socially acceptable. And I think now that we're understanding more and more about the human experience within those environments, I think we do maybe think twice about how we're talking to each other.
Totally. And I've had more experiences with participants making comments and I'm going, you really actually just said that to me?
Wow. Yeah.
And here's the interesting thing. I mean, coming from the perspective I come from, is when somebody is actually cruel when they're teaching, it's because they're triggered.
Wow. Yeah.
And they are having attachment issues. They're not giving the participants anything to grab hold of.
Oh, interesting.
So, and it's one of the pieces in when I teach, and I've taught probably 4,000 therapists in my career.
Cool.
And a whole bunch of other people who are coaches, is we cannot therapeutically go any further with a client than we have gone ourselves. So it's sort of akin to and I don't teach riding lessons, so this is like more of a metaphor. If I'm teaching a riding lesson and I only know how to trot, only know how to walk.
Yeah.
And how am I going to teach somebody to trot? How am I going to teach someone to transition into a canter? How am I going to teach anything about a lead? I mean, those kinds of things. So I think there are some clinicians out there that are very, very high level horse people.
Yeah.
well, my guess is it they objectify their horses or treat them from that I-it relationship because, and many people will say to me, well, I love horses and I connect but heck with people. And when I hear that, I really worry.
Right.
Because attachment is attachment is attachment is attachment.
Right.
And if we can't do that with one group of beings, we're not going to be able to do it with other groups of beings.
Well, and something that I heard, and I think it's a really great and beautiful, is a mantra for me on this road trip, because sometimes, you know, I have interactions, and my partner and I, Ben, have interactions with people that we, you know, you're kind of like, okay, we're navigating an unexpected situation here, and people are triggered by something. And something that I kind of come back to is, what if you were to imagine that everyone is doing the very best that they can with what they have or what they know? What if they're doing the very best that they can in that moment with like the tools that they have available to them? And that's helped me access more empathy in moments where someone might be being unkind or unjust. That like you said, there might be some there are amazing horsemen and horsewomen out there, but psychologically they might be doing the very best that they can in that clinic or in that situation with the tools that they have available to them. And so they're, like you said, they're just, they themselves might be triggered, and that's why they're behaving the way they're behaving.
Yes. If we can do that, that's great. I also, and this is for me, because when I teach, I teach a lot, and when I'm leading in groups, I have a very high expectation of myself.
Yes.
And I tend to do that with people who I'm asking to lead. For people to have done enough of their own work and process to be able to really hold that space for people. And especially, I think, in the horse world, because horses, we can get hurt.
Yeah.
Horses can get hurt. We can come off. We can get hurt. I don't know anybody in the horse world that hasn't had some relatively heavy-duty injury or injuries. Yeah. And there's enough, I think, to worry about around safety, with just physical safety. My horse, I have 3 horses. The horse I ride the most is Moondash, which I trust implicitly. And if I'm going through most of my riding is in the mountains and on trails and heavy duty trails sometimes. But if I'm going through a thicket and a deer jumps up, Moon's going to go sideways 10 or 12 feet.
Yeah, totally.
Not because he's misbehaving on any level, but because instinct has taken over.
Yeah.
And so there is danger even with the most sound of horses and the most grounded of horses. And even the last time I actually came off of a horse was my horse tripped. And so, and this was a different horse than Moon. But it was like, oh, that can happen. So safety is a big issue, and physical safety is a big issue. So if we can build in more emotional safety, 2 things I think can happen. One is the level of physical safety will go up. Yeah. Because we're more grounded. Yes. And 2 is, if there is something that happens, it truly is an accident. And accidents do happen. I mean, I was in a clinic, this was years ago, where the clinician came off their horse. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And this was a cow working clinic way up, again, north with a number of different people, and somebody else came off in that clinic, came off their horse and broke their leg.
Oh, wow.
And that wasn't the clinicians. I mean, the clinician was doing what they were supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
But those things happen. And so the more emotional safety we can have, the more grounded we are, the more connected to our horses we are,
Mm-hmm.
the more safe they're going to feel, the more safe we will be.
So what's some advice, like in the clinic that I'm going to this weekend, what are some things as a clinic participant that I can do?
The first and foremost biggest thing
Mm-hmm.
would be, because we've worked on this with you, and you're going to ride G or Lady?
I think I'm going to do G actually this weekend.
Okay. Work both in the clinic and outside of the clinic
Mm-hmm.
with giving G somebody to connect to.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's number one.
So not going into the future or in the past, like staying present in the
Yes.
moment and connecting with him in the moment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I would also suggest that you maybe even speak about wanting people to, how do we support each other in this? To actually ask that question openly.
Cool.
What my guess is if you ask that question,
Mm-hmm.
and the last clinic I was in was, again, it was up north, as I actually asked that question, and we were all on our horses in the arena warming up,
Mm-hmm.
and it was, again, working with cows, and it's a couple who put the clinic together, and it was like, what do you want out of the clinic, et cetera, and one of the things I asked was, how do we support each other in this?
Cool.
And everybody, there were like maybe 12 people there.
Mm.
Everyone went, I mean, you could just see the energy go.
Cool.
So, and the other last piece I'd say is, if you need to do something to take care of yourself, do it.
Cool.
Even if that means getting off your horse.
I love that. That's very helpful.
Because if we don't allow our horses something or somebody to attach to, that's when things get dangerous. And that's when we leave our clinics feeling not.
Yeah, you just feel really bad about yourself. And then
Totally.
it's supposed to be an amazing learning experience, but it doesn't feel like that.
Exactly.
Okay, well, to wrap up, I always ask everyone the same question, which is
Now I'm getting nervous.
a series of questions, actually. But it's really exciting because they're rapid fire questions, and I'm always excited to hear what everyone has to say.
Okay.
If you could read one book to the horse world, what would it be?
Faraway Horses.
Oh, awesome. By?
I'm actually trying to remember. I think that might be, I forget whether Mark I think Mark wrote that.
Yeah, I think
Mark
so.
Russian,
Yeah. Who is the most iconic horse in history?
Secretariat.
Oh, okay. Good one. Most undervalued skill as a rider?
Being able to breathe and stay with your breath and do that consciously through your body.
Who is the greatest horseman in history?
Ray Hunt.
Mares, stallions, or geldings?
Yes.
No, which one?
I know.
Mares, stallions, or geldings?
I actually don't have a pick.
No?
No, I haven't done that much with stallions. So, but in my experience, both mares and geldings I've had great experiences with.
So, all of the above.
Yeah, I've not been around stallions much to know that, to be able to go, oh yeah, let's go there.
Yeah.
I don't have that skill.
Well, maybe one day.
Maybe one day.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Dewey.
Thank you so much.